Hello Displorers, welcome back to another exciting video presented to you by Displore, and thanks for watching. In this video we shall be taking a closer look into the activities of Africa's biggest organization, the African Union. African countries, in a bid to foster development and peace on the continent, decided to come together and create a powerful organization called the African Union. The organization was founded in 2001 and launched in 2002, so after 19 years of existence, has the Union been able to live up to expectations? But before we dive into the activities of the Union to examine if it's all actually serving its purpose, if you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Background and introduction of the African Union. The African Union, commonly called the AU, is a continental union consisting of 55 member states located on the continent of Africa. The historical foundations of the African Union originated in the First Congress of Independent African States, held in Accra, Ghana from 15 to 22nd April 1958. The conference aimed at forming the Africa Day to mark the liberation movement each year concerning the willingness of the African people to free themselves from foreign dictatorship as well as subsequent attempts to unite Africa. This led to the creation of the Organization of African Unity, OAU, in 1963. Critics argue that the OAU in particular did little to protect the rights and liberties of African citizens from their own political leaders, often dubbing it as the Dictators Club. The idea of creating the AU was revived in the mid-1990s under the leadership of Libyan head of state Muammar al-Gaddafi. The heads of state and government of the OAU issued the Sirte Declaration, named after Sirte, a city in Libya, on 9 September 1999, calling for the establishment of an African Union. The declaration was followed by a summit at Lomé in 2000, when the Constitutive Act of the African Union was adopted, and at Lusaka in 2001, when the plan for the implementation of the African Union was adopted. The Union was eventually founded on 26 May 2001 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and launched on 9 July 2002 in Durban, South Africa. The intention of the AU was to replace the Organization of African Unity, the OAU. The most important decisions of the AU are made by the Assembly of the African Union, a semi-annual meeting of the heads of state and government of its member states. The AU Secretariat, the African Union Commission, is based in Addis Ababa and is currently headed by the President of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who took over from the President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt. Within the African Union, there are official bodies such as the Peace and Security Council and the Pan-African Parliament. In a nutshell, the vision of the African Union is that of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in global arena. Now, let's examine why the African Union was created in the first place. The objectives of the African Union. The African Union was created for the following reasons. 1. To achieve greater unity, cohesion and solidarity between the African countries. 2. To defend the sovereignty, territorial integrity and independence of its member states. 3. To accelerate the political and socio-economic integration of the continent. 4. To promote and defend African common positions on issues of interest to the continent and its peoples. 5. To encourage international cooperation, taking due account of the Charter of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 6. To promote peace, security, and stability on the continent. 7. To promote democratic principles and institutions, popular participation, and good governance. 8. To promote and protect human people's rights in accordance with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and under relevant human rights instruments. 9. To establish the necessary conditions which enable the continent to play its full role in the global economy and its international negotiations. Number 10. To promote sustainable development at economic, social and cultural levels, as well as the integration of African economies. 11. To promote cooperation in all fields of human activity to raise the living standards of African peoples. 12. To coordinate and harmonize the policies between the existing and future regional economic communities for the gradual attainment of the objectives of the Union. 13. To advance the development of the continent by promoting research in all fields, in particular in science and technology. And lastly, 14. To work with relevant international partners in the eradication of preventable diseases and the promotion of good health on the continent. The AU has been successful in addressing the needs of the African political class, but as to making a significant difference in the lives of many ordinary Africans, its relevance is still debatable. The AU has socialized African leaders to accept liberal values as a foundation of the international cooperation in Africa, enhance the agency of African political class on the world stage, and establish progressive and innovative rules and norms for the African continent. It has also created many useful decision-making structures that have contributed to the prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts in Africa. The AU has been effective in developing the African peace and security architecture to deal with a number of violent conflicts and political crises on the continent. It was effectively mobilized to sanction unconstitutional transfers of political power, prevent conflict, and roll out or engage in peace operations. Since the year 2000, more than 50 peace operations have been undertaken in 18 African countries. Seems like with all these achievements, you will think the African Union has a blueprint for success. Well, that's far from the truth. Most of the Union's decisions and resolutions, most often than not, ends on paper and are never executed to the end. The African Union did promise Africans a better continent, prosperous, peaceful, and a general solution to the continent's problems. But 19 years having passed after the creation of the Union, have they kept to their promises or are they living up to expectations? To analyze if the African Union is serving its purpose, we will examine some main aspects of the objectives such as politics and democracy, corruption, economy, development, financing and reforms, trade and security. Unlike the organizations like the European Union, the AU in the last 19 years has been unable to bring substantial changes on the continent. The European Union, for example, has a currency known as the euro, which is used by most of its member states. The AU, however, has not been able to achieve a common currency for its member states. There is a proposal for a common currency called Afro, which is scheduled to be introduced by 2023. Hopefully that goes through. Also, the AU has been unable to grant free access to citizens of member states since most Africans need visa to travel to countries within the continent. Politics and democracy. At the time of launching, one of its objectives was to promote democratic principles and institutions in Africa. Has the AU lived up to expectation in that domain? Well, not really. In December of 2018, when election results were disrupted in Democratic Republic of the Congo, the AU was caught flat-footed as Felix Tshisekedi was named the winner. The AU said that there were serious doubts about the outcome of the vote and called on Kinshasa to suspend the final result. The call was flatly rejected and the AU stayed quiet. In 2015, Burundi's President Pierre Nkurunziza went against his country's constitution to run for a third term in office in a vote boycotted by the opposition, which was followed by deadly violence. AU said it would send 5,000 peacekeepers, but Nkurunziza said he would consider the move an invasion. The union backed down and said it would send observers instead. Rwanda's Paul Kagame has been in power since 2000, and following a referendum in 2015, Kagame can rule Rwanda until 2034. With that, we wonder what democracy the union is out to promote. The union has been unable to bring peace in Cameroon, Uganda and Congo, the latter having removed terms of limits for their long-serving leaders and the union being unconcerned. Africa even has 6 of the world's top 10 longest-serving non-monarchs leaders. With leaders of AU member countries acting out, you might expect the AU to stand up and sanction such line crossing by these leaders, but that has not been the case at all. In fact, constitutional crisis remains a common issue which many African countries have dealt with in recent years, and the AU has also come under criticism for failing to deal with this crisis and encouraging countries to respect their laws. Although many Western nations have imposed sanctions on African nations in the past, the AU has not followed suit. Most of these imposed sanctions come from other countries abroad, especially Europe and America. But within Africa, we have never witnessed the AU standing up and saying, you know what, we can impose sanctions on some leaders so they are able to improve their country's human rights environment. Corruption. Africa loses more than $150 billion to corruption annually, a figure that is equivalent to a quarter of the continent's average gross domestic product. Transparency International's 2018 Corruption Perspection Index revealed 6 of the 10 most corrupt countries in the world are in Africa, but the AU has vowed to crack down on corruption with the bloc's 2018 summit theme based on fighting corruption. AU's Commission Chief Moussa Faki during last year's summit had this to say, and I quote, "Every year the African continent loses close to $150 billion to corruption. This is unacceptable and must be addressed with immediate effect. Otherwise, the vision of achieving an Africa that is self-sustaining and prosperous will remain nothing but a dream." End of quote. This is an indication that the AU still has a long way to go when it comes to combating corruption on the continent. Security. Conflict still affects many countries on the continent, from Mali in the west to Somalia in the east and South Sudan, DR Congo and Cameroon in the center. Shortly after its formation, the AU agreed to set up the African Standby Force, ASF. The force was created in order to be deployed in times of crisis and to avoid reliance on the outside world when it came to maintenance of peace in Africa. In 2007, the AU sent troops to Somalia to back the government in Mogadishu fighting the al-Qaeda-linked rebel group. The AU mission in Somalia, AMISOM, pushed the armed group al-Shabaab not just from the capital Mogadishu but from most parts of Somalia. But the AU's mission to Somalia's successes would not have been possible without the financial backing of the European Union and the United States. The AU also sent peacekeepers to Sudan's southwest Darfur region in 2004, following a conflict between the government in Khartoum and the rebel groups. But after failing to contain the violence and facing financial difficulties, the operation was merged with the United Nations mission in 2007. The AU has managed to handle some few crises on the continent, but their success still feels like salted water. Free trade and development. An area that the bloc has been relatively successful in is the planned creation of the Continental Free Trade Area. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement (AfCFTA) crossed the necessary threshold for continental implementation in May 2019, in which the lowering of intra-African trade tariffs can produce significant long-term economic gains. While there is evidence that reducing barriers to trade can unlock economic potential, there are also examples of how free trade agreements can lead to social dislocations and destabilization. Therefore, there will be factors which could foster as well as hinder member states' engagement and cooperation in the actual implementation of the AfCFTA. 19 countries have signed up to the agreement and turned it into a domestic law, including South Africa, the continent's second largest economy. Africa's largest economy, Nigeria, was initially skeptical about signing, but however signed in July 2019. But the agreement needs signatures of at least 22 countries to take effect. Successful implementation of the AfCFTA could help deliver equitable human development, strengthen regional integration, and further the development agendas of African institutions, including Agenda 2063, which is Africa's blueprint and master plan for transforming Africa into the global powerhouse of the future. Financing and reforms. One of the biggest challenges that continues to plague the AU is the lack of money to finance its big ambitions and pledges. Currently, 72% of the AU's budget is funded by external partners. Even the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa was funded and constructed by China. President Kagame had this to say in 2018, "Promoting peace and security is one of the core functions of our union. However, up to this point, we have lacked a credible mechanism to fund our priority operations in this domain. We depend too extensively on external resources." The financing challenges the AU is faced with has important unintended consequences. High levels of donors' dependency have weakened ownership in the critical area of the AU's mandate and has led to strategic drifts. As the AU Commission increasingly focuses on externally financed activities, external influences are creeping in due to the fact that most of the African Union's financing is done through external sources, leading to donors influencing major reforms and decisions by bloc, which affects the interest and incentive environment around the AU. Most often than not, the AU takes decisions with the donors at heart and forgetting the people that they are supposed to be caring for. Conclusion. The creation of the AU to take over the OAU was a great move to lay a solid blueprint and foundation for Africa to develop and move forward after OAU failed to solidify Africa's feet on the ground after independence. The bloc has been going towards the right terminal in bringing peace, security, democracy, promotion, education, and the provision of basic needs to the common man in Africa. And yet it still feels like salted tea, as the AU still has a long way to go in bringing at least 50% of the promised purpose of the bloc. In fighting corruption and promoting democracy, if the same leaders changing the constitution of their countries in order to remain in power are made heads of the AU, then the AU's purpose is greatly questioned. The most disheartening part is when the AU is unable to bring member country leaders to order and impose sanctions to those violating its people's rights. It makes many wonder if the AU is a toothless bulldog or knows what they are doing. The AU has made significant efforts in attaining its goals, but the truth is, after 19 years of existence, they are not living up to expectation because the continent of Africa is still the poorest and most corrupt despite the fact that it is blessed with abundant natural resources and hardworking people. The African Union has to step up to the plate and serve the people who have trusted them to serve their interest. Thanks for watching this video. Please give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe and share with your friends.